This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilber from Cherished Companions. So, Doug, what's going on in the world of caregiving?
Well, we are staying extraordinarily busy um, with with things. This last year has been challenging in a lot of ways. What we're noticing is probably a seismic shift in caregiving in our country. When I started the company, I really had this belief that people do better in a home setting. I think I've mentioned this before, as far as in not only my vision, but also the reasons behind that vision. But my belief that people do better in a home setting, and that we really are kind of dealing with an archaic system where, in the past, the view has been kind of, let's warehouse mom or dad, when they get to a certain age, that it's almost inevitable that someone ends up in a nursing home of some sort of institutional care. And my belief was, no, people want to stay home that are older, and they do better if they do stay home. So why don't we make it possible for someone to be able to remain at home? And a lot of the beliefs around that is that, group care isn't as good as individual care, and people just don't do real well in the institutional settings for a whole series of reasons. It also, disease can spread easier, and it's just many, many things.
Right.
And what COVID has done is it has created the kind of the backdrop to be able to illuminate and show a lot of the flaws in the system. So what we're seeing is many people are now saying, I got to get mom home, that are in institutions, or I do not want to put my mom or dad into a facility because I know the problems that I've been hearing. You've probably heard some of the controversy that's going on in New York, where Governor Cuomo went from what seemed like a hero to talk of impeachment because of issues around the nursing homes and COVID patients there and other things. And I'm not going to get into anything as far as a comment about that, but it's things like that that are shining a really bright spotlight on some of the issues that have occurred in nursing homes just in general. So we've been busy with doing a lot of intakes. I don't know how many I've done this week. I literally have lost count. And that's a good thing. I really believe that the vision that I have and the reasons that I did it, is really being met now with with the idea that others are getting it, they're understanding it, and things. So you asked the question, I gave you the
Give you
answer.
the answer. Well, it's interesting because this morning I had to go run an errand, and we live across the street from two senior centers, rehab
Mhm.
type senior centers. And I saw the name senior. Okay.
Yeah,
And all of a sudden I got very upset. It's like, why are we segregating our seniors?
Mhm.
Sometimes we do much better when we are integrated with all ages, you know, and we're, like you've said, amongst our own personal things. And
Right.
I know there is a reason for some of these centers, but when you drive from community to community now, they're rampant. And
Yeah.
it scares me because my mom was in independent living, okay, but it was a senior area. We had her move there because we all lived out of town and she didn't want to move with any of us. So, hey, we needed her in sort of a safe place. But one of the things that she complained about a lot of the times was, I'm only around old people.
Right.
And I saw that had something to do with her health at times. And so I'm not saying COVID is a blessing, but in some ways it is a blessing for many of us to wake up and say, you know what? Um, my mom and dad don't have to be shipped out. And I don't want to be shipped out someday. So
Right.
what can we do, to keep mom and dad at home? And
Yeah.
you have a plan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do to you. I think we sometimes, and I think I've told you this before, but there's a little bit difference in the view that an older person has versus someone that is younger, that are the kids of someone that needs help. The primary focus of a younger person looking out and for the needs of their parent. And when I'm saying younger, younger could be 70 years old or something at this point in time, but is the safety of their parent. They're worried about the safety of their parent. The parent's primary concern is keeping independence. Yeah, we have kind of potentially conflicting motivations. The older person wants the independence. The younger person wants, the safety, and really, home care answers both of those because you can provide safety in the home, and you can also have a situation where the the individual is able to still make decisions and be involved in the decision-making process and other things. So the plan really comes with figuring out needs and seeing how we can patch that hole, how we can be that means so that they get the safety and they get the independence that they can have. I mean, in these situations, and obviously, independence is based on um, certain things. You may have independence, but you may need to delegate someone else driving.
Right.
Yeah, so you still have the ability to go and do things, but you're delegating who's actually doing the driving in that situation. Ultimately, it's not the driving that's the important, it's being able to go where you want to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when my mother moved to independent living, um, the doctors had taken away her car keys. They did it for us so that as kids, we didn't have to do that to her.
Right.
But where she was living, she wasn't in walking distance of anything. She wasn't on a bus line. And the relatives that we had and her friends who were still driving didn't live in her circle. And so that was why we made the decision we did and why she sort of went along with it. Um, and in the beginning, she liked it because, again, there was a van that could take her. We had relatives who lived within a mile of where she was living. So, if the drop of a hat, if she wanted to go out to lunch, she could call them and they would, come get her.
Right.
And that's important. But for a lot of people, they look at it, and I've heard a lot of my own friends say this, you know, I don't want to be responsible for my mother or father. I
Right.
love them. I'll go visit them. And so they look at these nursing homes, independent living, assisted living places as this is where I can go ship mom and dad off. But then
Right.
when they start looking at the pricing of it and then seeing that the care, and I'm not saying they all give bad care because they don't, but
Right.
it's not the same as having a caregiver coming into your house and knowing what you like for breakfast, you know,
Mhm.
knowing how you like your dish put down in front of you. Um, that's important.
Right. Yeah, there's a couple things that I think oftentimes with something like what you said, the idea around doing things the way you like them done. That's kind of the independence. That's the control thing. You're not getting, basically what is on the menu that day. It can be customized. It can be based on what your needs are. And I'll give you um, an example of how that can really make a difference. My mom, who I provided care for, and siblings, and then we had it so that there was a caregiver with her. One of the things that was interesting is my mom was always a night owl. I mean, always a night owl. So she was one who would be up 12:30, 1 o'clock at night, and that was just her pattern, and potentially later. And she got that kick of energy in the evening, and she was a worker, and she would work, and she'd be involved in things, and so she was just a night owl. Well, um, she also slept in late. So I was not one of these children that had the mother that cooked the pancake breakfast in the morning before school. It was go in and kiss mom on the
Right.
forehead
Yeah.
and go and run and catch the bus. That's I was always envious of the kids that had the other, but I survived. I did just fine, and my siblings did too. So we actually learned a certain amount of independence
Sure.
because of that. But here's kind of the thing about it is my mom would, even as she got older, would like to sleep in the morning. And we started to observe something, and it was specifically the caregivers observed it, as well as family members, but that if she got up early, she did not do well during that day. She would have episodes of things that were, not good. Her memory wasn't as good. She just did not function well. And that's because her rhythm was built in a very certain way. Now, if she was in a facility, I guarantee you that in most cases, she would be up and, at 6, 7, maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, because that's how they do it. They have to get them into the breakfast, and they have to do the other thing. And this is not besmirching the homes for doing it. That is just what happens when you have hundreds of people that
Sure.
you're trying to take care of. But for my mom, that would be the wrong thing. And it was. And so what we found is we let her sleep in. The aide would allow her to sleep in until she would naturally wake up. And 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 it made a difference. She was literally a different person. She functioned differently when she did that, and it was just the way her body was built, and or the patterns that she had set for 90 years, and so I think that the idea around caregiving is that customized. And to the point of your friend, that if someone has a particular need, that they have, we can end up in those situations being able to meet a specific need at a specific time. And I think I realized something. I mentioned something about a friend, but I don't think you mentioned that in the podcast. We
Right.
talked
We talked
beforehand.
about it before.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So I do have a friend who his mother has been ill. She's, recovering and everything, but she's lived on her own. And he's a great son. He goes to visit her regularly, takes her wherever she needs to go. But it's now questionable, should mom really go back home again? Or should we find someplace wonderful for mom? And, um, my comment is, if you have people who are available to be around that person, and then you're introducing home care in between, number one, I agree it's going to be a lot less expensive. Uh, your parent is, like you said, isn't going to have to get up to eat breakfast in a certain time manner. I know there's a couple of facilities now that say, whenever you get up, you can come on down for breakfast and we'll make you breakfast. And if you don't want to eat lunch with everybody, but I'm sure it's not as customized as that. It might be if you come down late for breakfast, yes, you can have a bowl of cereal. You may not be having what everybody else had. But when you're home, you're amongst your things. When your family comes to visit you, it's it's comfortable. Um, Even in the last 2.5 months of my mom's life, when she was bedridden and blind and not knowing it, I mean, it was a jumble of things, but you could tell she was more comfortable, and people who came to visit her were comfortable.
Mhm.
They knew my mother's house, they knew her living room, they knew
Right.
everything about it. And I think that's why the day that she passed, I didn't have a problem just sitting with her. You know, Everybody thought that I was going to be the first one to leave the room, but I stayed with her until the undertaker got there because this was her home, and I wanted
Right.
her to know that she was still in her home. Um, and I don't know how we get people to start seeing more of that today.
Well, the first thing is the understanding. You had mentioned something before, which was the idea that to some degree, there's that idea that if you place mom in a facility or dad in a facility, you're going to not have to worry anymore. And it's kind of that relief. I've passed the baton, someone else is now responsible. But that's not how it really works. You still have the responsibility. You still own that piece of things. And as much as you would, and all of us would like to remove a bit of a burden in our lives, that's not going to be where the burden is going to be removed, because you'll still have to deal with issues or things that are going to be going on. So I think part of it is dispelling the idea that that's something that is going to be the reality, because it really is not likely to be the reality that someone has. Um, and then, but there is an idea, which is getting professional help. And if I were trying to do personally what we do on a daily basis, where we have people who are literally dedicated to schedules and stuff like that, I would go crazy trying to do it for a family member. It becomes a full-time job in that situation. And so the idea of being in a facility, relieving all your pressure, that's not going to happen. The idea that some of the pressure can be significantly removed by hiring a professional is true. And that's whether it be a facility or in a home setting. And in both cases, the idea of being able to delegate some of the work is important. So in our case, if what we do when we're trying to help someone along is I do a free assessment. So I'll go and I'll talk with someone, or I'll do it by Zoom meeting, in the time of COVID, if someone prefers that. And we'll actually discuss, okay, what are the needs? Where is the issues when are the issues occurring? What are the issues that are occurring? And then we try to work out a plan, okay? And some people, that plan is 24-hour
Sure.
care, 7 days a week. In other families, it might be that it's the bookends of the day. We get someone in there in the morning when it's busy and get them through breakfast and lunch. And then at the other end of the day, dinner to bedtime, and the afternoon is kind of the slow time. They're fine during that time. Some people, it's overnight, where we're just there because that's when the needs are, because families there are other times. but the fact is the relief part of it is when you delegate to a professional to say, okay, you take care of the schedule, you work, you do the hiring, you take on this. And the magic of it, honestly, is in the plan, in working together to try to say, what will be that difference? What is going to be the thing that will keep mom independent, keep dad safe? And, and, and that's where working with an agency can make a difference. And here's another reason is why it makes such a huge difference is because, I've done this with literally thousands of people,
Sure.
since we started the company. I've done, I'm just guessing, you know, probably a minimum of 3,000 intakes, since we started the company. That's a minimum, I think, of doing this. And so I have seen almost everything. I have seen almost every disorder that someone has experienced. I mean, I've seen those rare neurological conditions. I've seen, strange cancers. I've seen different types of dementia. And so for a family, when you come into this, you're really kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I don't know where to begin. And what I'll do for folks, and we as a company will do, is we'll walk them through that. We'll say, okay, here's what experience has shown. This is what the needs are. Interestingly enough, when I deal with families, most of the time they have kind of a gut feel for what they need. And most of the time they're actually right, with like the hours that they need and other things. Occasionally I run into someone is way off. I had a family that was a week ago and or 2 weeks ago, and they were wanting to bring actually it was someone wanting to bring a sister home from a facility, and they were so far off. They thought they just needed a couple hours of care, and literally they needed 24 hours of care. But that's the exception. Most of the time people have a fairly realistic view of what they're needing, and it's usually pretty close, with some tweaks. We can oftentimes make in these circumstances, we can make those things happen, and the gut is usually right.
Well, and one of the things I noticed when my mom was in independent living, uh, my brother would go to visit her 2 or 3 times a year, and spend like 2 weeks at a time with her. He'd stock up her toilet paper and everything else in her house. Um, and he'd get her set. And then in between his visits, we'd go to visit. And he would notice things, obviously, in the 2 weeks because he was staying actually with her. And he would call us and he'd say, look, I'm noticing that mom may need somebody to come in and do some light housekeeping. She doesn't see everything. And we know she likes a clean house. So then we knew that we had to get services for that, um, because she lost the ability to count properly. Her numbers were way off. When she'd go to even sort out her own pills, she couldn't sort them out. Um,
Yeah.
and, you know, if you weren't there watching her do it, and so my brother noticed it, I came in to visit and I noticed the same thing. She was putting, 5 of something in something where she only needed one. And so
Right.
then we went out and we said, okay, we needed home care to at least come and deliver her medications for her and make sure she takes them. Um, and so we started out light. Obviously, we didn't have to have care 24/7. We didn't need long hours in the day. But then we also realized that she didn't like taking the community bus to go to the grocery store. And so
Mm.
when we didn't have family members to take her, we then got somebody through a care service who once a week would call my mother up, what do you want for groceries? We made sure there was money in her bank so that they could do that. And sometimes my mother went with her, and sometimes she went on her own.
Right.
So you're right. I think as a family, you sort of know, unless you're putting on blinders and want to believe that mom and dad or brother or sister are just fine the way they are. But the
Right,
reality
right.
of it is, open your eyes and you'll know.
Well, and I think where sometimes there is some confusion is when something's changed. For example, if someone broke a leg, went in to a facility, got rehab, and then they're coming home, that's where sometimes I think people can be off because they remember them before they broke their leg, but a broken leg or a broken hip or whatever can literally change the map of what the person needs. And again, that's where having a professional service can make a difference as far as the advice, even. So, just as and so people understand how I believe a good agency should work. And I know that the scope of this is not limited to our
Sure.
service area. So, my desire in presenting this is not so that people just use Cherished Companions, but that people know that what they need to do in Boca Raton, Florida,
Right.
or California, or wherever it is that is not Northeast Ohio. But here's the thing that people should understand is that a good agency in this situation should really work with you, help you to understand, help you navigate through the crisis and that maybe you're currently in, and through the processes that you need to know, and really just kind of hold your hand and walk you through it a little bit because of that experience. So, that's really the care management piece of a good agency. And so, if someone's working with an agency and for some reason they're not getting that, or they did not get that at the beginning, they need to look for a different agency. They really need to work with someone who um, has their interests first and foremost, and has the care of their loved one at the very top of what they're doing. And I mean, there are many times where I have over the years told someone um, something that would eliminate hours for us because because it was an idea that could make a difference so that they didn't need as much hours or care to help them save money. And that's what a good agency should do, um, in my belief, because it really is focusing in on the right thing for that individual. And again, for those who aren't in the service area for us, or who are using other companies, even if they are in our service area, just make sure that you're getting that you're drawing on that expertise.
Well, and I think it's important for those who are involved in the care of the individual, whether it's the children or the spouse or other relatives. You need to take part in understanding what the agency is doing.
Mhm.
Um, because, as I've expressed before, we had numerous agencies working with my mom. There were some that were just absolutely horrible, and they had good ratings. But with my mom, the people they sent out just weren't right. So I'm not going to say the agencies themselves were bad. Maybe
Right.
that's who they had available, and we were in dire straits. We needed somebody. Um, but I'm glad that I was there to experience it. But that's why you need to be involved. Um, you know, you can only do your due diligence on the people that you hire to a point. Okay.
Right.
People do change. Um, And if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And that's when you need to have that conversation. Um,
Yeah, and I will say too, and I think this is important, is um, that many times a caregiver may be a good caregiver, but may not be the right caregiver in this circumstance.
exactly. Exactly.
And so I've had situations where we've had someone that has absolutely had rave reviews from other clients. They go into another client that is different from the one they got the rave reviews, and we have someone saying, yeah, we don't, it just wasn't the right fit, it didn't feel good or whatever. And it wasn't because the caregiver was a bad caregiver. It's kind of like a blind date. You don't know until you go on it,
Yeah.
that to some degree, that caregiver match is a little bit magical, in that you think it's the right match, but you may not realize whether, well, you won't realize whether it is or not until you actually have the chemistry, because it's people. And it, people, it's kind of the mystery of a friend. Why is it that I'm friends with this person but not friends with
Exactly.
someone else? Why do I have that sudden connection with someone in some circumstances? In other circumstances, it's not like I dislike them, but there isn't that thing of connection that you get. And I do believe that there is a little bit of that in this. And also skill sets. And I'll just give you an example. We have some people that, if they were to do a shift that goes for hours and hours and hours, um, I can pretty much guarantee you the family's not going to like them much unless it's a one-time thing. Because we have some caregivers, they are great in going in and taking care of an issue, a problem, whatever, and then moving on to another client. So just, a few hours here, they go to another few hours, another few hours. They love the mixing up of things. And it's just kind of, that's what floats their boat as far
Right.
as
Sure.
from a caregiver standpoint or a caregiving standpoint. Um, so if I were to put that person into a situation where it was 12 hours, they really would not rock and roll with that. They would not do well with it at all. And so that again is that understanding. That's where a good scheduler really knows their people well, and then they do that match, and that match can be really, really remarkable. And I had a friend in this business who's had great success, and early on, I remember him saying to me, "There's a place for everyone," and he was talking about for the caregivers. You just have to kind of figure out where that place is and the appropriate things. And obviously there are people who are quote unquote caregivers that are incompetent and bad, and we're not talking those people. We're talking about the people that from personality otherwise are going to fit in this situation, and possibly not in another situation.
No, it's interesting because my mother had this one caregiver that came from not the regular company that we were working with. And when she walked in, um, falsely, I misjudged her. Uh, I just didn't feel comfortable. And my mother was sleeping. And so what she said was when she, clocked in and everything, she sat down. She said, I'm going to be sitting in here. I think you should go in the other room and go to sleep. And she was right, but I didn't like her telling me to do that. Um, and I had hard time, but I went in the other room. I tried to sleep. I turned the TV on, whatever. But a couple hours later, I heard her talking to my mom, and it was beautiful.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
conversation was phenomenal. My mother was almost giddy. Um, and I came to the bedroom door and I looked in, and the caregiver told me to come on in, and she said, "Oh, your mother's so delightful." And this now she had personality. And so I said something to her in the morning before she left. And she said, "I wasn't here to make you happy. I was here for your mom." She said, "So I wasn't going to entertain you." She said, "I was being polite, period." And
Mhm.
I thought about it and I thought, you know what? She's right. She was excellent with my mother. And my
Mhm.
mother the next day asked if she was coming back that night. And
Mhm.
sadly, she wasn't coming back for a couple of nights. And I said, "Well, she'll be here in a couple of nights." She said, "You've got to keep reminding me." And
Mhm.
so, you know,
Yeah,
I'm sure we all do that to some degree, but sometimes we got to take a step back and make sure that the person they're caring for is getting what they need.
right, exactly. Yeah, and I do think that when you're when you're dealing with caregivers, the thing to most observe is the interaction, the relationship with the primary recipient
Right.
of that. Not that the other isn't important, because it is. I mean, you need to be reassured that everything is good and comfortable and stuff like that. But I do think that you do make a really good point, which is look at that relationship and the interactions that are there, and just know that that's the most important one of all the things that you're seeing, observing, um,
Absolutely.
and experiencing. It's that person's experience that is most important, that the care recipients. So
So if people want to contact you in Northeast Ohio, how do they do that?
So there is, multiple ways that you can contact, but the best way, the easiest way is call our main number, which is 440-484-5390. And just call and we can talk through things. Everyone in the office is more than willing to talk and explain. They can ask for me personally, Doug Wilber, and I think that we can help walk them through things. The one thing I will tell you is we are not trying to sell anything in this. When someone has a conversation with us, it's not meant to be in any way a pressure thing. It's meant to be a conversation to help you walk through that individual experience and make decisions in the best way that you can, and help you get through that. You can go to our website as well, cherishedagency.com. We have free downloads, free materials that people can get if they want, and I welcome people to download away and get the information that is of interest. But the phone call is really the simplest and the easiest way of reaching us. So
And I think it's important that people start taking those steps and getting the information before it becomes an emergency.
yeah,
And
uh,
too many of us wait until the last minute because, again, we want mom and dad to be okay. We want our spouse to be okay. But then all of a sudden it's not. And
mhm.
sometimes we don't have enough time to make all the right decisions. So,
Well, you've heard the old saying, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of
right.
cure." And that really is true as your parents are getting older, or as an individual is getting older. If someone intervenes, and starts helping, the likelihood of some of the big things happening gets pushed off. It's not eliminated. You can't put someone and totally wrap them in a bubble. I don't care where they are; they're not going to be, you know, 100% without any risk or ability to have things like a fall or whatever. But we can eliminate a heck of a lot by intervening early on, and so often we are. The story is, it goes something like this: someone's doing fine, driving, doing all sorts of things, and but they're having some underlying things that the family may not even be aware of. The person has a fall, breaks a hip, and instead of needing a few hours a day, they are now needing 24 hours a day when they get home. And that switch happened in part at times because of the fact that the person could have gotten help and did not have the help that they needed at the time. So it could, where people oftentimes like a fall like that, I remember a situation where literally someone was, doing something outside, which they really probably shouldn't be doing. And because they were trying to do something and there wasn't someone there sort of as a helper, they have a fall and they had, a catastrophe. Whereas if they had gotten a little bit of help, maybe could have forego that catastrophe in that situation. And but hindsight is always 2020. And your point is really good though, which is get the ball going and moving. And even if sometimes it's a few hours a week, even getting used to having someone there can oftentimes make a huge difference for someone.
Absolutely. Well, again,
So,
I want to thank you. Information is important for all of us. And again, wherever you live, there's somebody like Cherished Companions in your community. So
right.
get the conversation going. So
Sounds good. Well,
have
thank
a
you.
great
And
day.
you too. Bye-bye.
I
Thanks.
know.